I've pulled together 17 times directors went completely off the rails, from obsessive perfectionists to full-blown maniacs who nearly killed their cast and crew in the name of art. We're going to go through each one, explain what they did, and ask the only question that matters: was the shot really worth it? By the end, I'll crown the most extreme director meltdown of them all. So buckle up, this isn't a tribute to great filmmaking. It's a tour of just how far directors will go even if everyone else has to suffer for it. John Landis, Twilight Zone, the movie, 1983. I've heard stories about directors pushing things too far, but this one still hits differently. You might know John Landis from Animal House or The Blues Brothers, but in 1982, he directed a segment of Twilight Zone, the movie that ended in one of the darkest moments in Hollywood history. He ordered a nighttime helicopter stunt loaded with explosions, flying dangerously low, and standing right beneath it were two illegally hired child actors, Mika Din Ali and Renee Shin Yi Chen. They were just 7 and 6 years old. Crew members raised concerns, but the cameras rolled anyway. A blast misfired, the chopper spiraled out of control, and within seconds it crashed and killed the kids and actor Vic Morrow. Landis was charged with involuntary manslaughter, the first time a director ever faced criminal charges over an on-set death, but was ultimately acquitted. The shot? It never even made it into the final film. It's easy to say that that would never happen today, but this is exactly why. Modern safety protocols, stricter labor laws, they exist because of this. And every time I hear someone praise Landis's early work, I can't help but wonder, if 3 people die for a scene that gets cut, can you still call it filmmaking, or is it something else entirely? Alfred Hitchcock, The Birds, 1963, Psycho, 1960. I knew Hitchcock was obsessive, but this is something else. On The Birds, he promised Tippi Hedren they'd use mechanical birds, then threw live ones at her for 5 straight days. She was scratched, pecked, and had birds literally tied to her costume so she couldn't move. By the end, she collapsed in tears. A studio doctor stepped in and told Hitchcock point blank, "You keep going like this and you're going to seriously hurt her." And then there's Psycho. For that legendary shower scene, Janet Leigh spent an entire week getting doused in real water, while Hitchcock demanded she hold her eyes open like a corpse. Take after take, no contacts allowed. She nailed the performance, but it messed with her for life. Leigh later admitted she never took a shower again unless absolutely necessary, and only with the door open and bathroom locked. Hitchcock got the performances he wanted. You and I still talk about these scenes like they're untouchable, but when you realize what it took to get them, there's a fine line between brilliance and cruelty. And Hitchcock didn't just cross it, he lived on the other side. Stanley Kubrick, The Shining, 1980, Full Metal Jacket, 1987. I expected Stanley Kubrick to be intense, but what I didn't expect was how far he'd push people just to get the take. On The Shining, he made Shelley Duvall film the iconic baseball bat scene 127 times. She later said she cried for 12 hours a day every day for months, until her hair literally started falling out. Kubrick even told the crew not to sympathize with her, isolating her on purpose just to keep her emotionally frayed. And yeah, it worked. She's haunting in that film, but I can't watch it without thinking about what it cost her. And then came Full Metal Jacket. Kubrick cast real-life ex-Marine R. Lee Ermey as the drill sergeant and told him not to speak to the younger actors offset, just to keep the fear alive between takes. The jelly donut scene took 37 takes alone and left Ermey without a voice. Most actors needed 15-60 takes per scene under Kubrick, but Ermey was such a force they could wrap some of his scenes in just 3, a miracle by Kubrick standards. The performances? Flawless. But you've got to ask yourself, well, how much suffering is too much? Because from where I'm sitting, Kubrick wasn't just making movies, he was breaking people to do it. And now that you know, you might feel that crack every time you rewatch those scenes. Sam Peckinpah, The Wild Bunch, 1969, Straw Dogs, 1971. I went into this one expecting chaos, and Peckinpah didn't disappoint. On The Wild Bunch, he demanded real gunfire for sound tests and allegedly fired live rounds at a wall just to prove his point. He packed the set with 90,000 rounds of blank ammo, wired bridges to explode while stunt riders galloped across them, and even used tripwires to send horses crashing into rivers. One assistant director tried to physically fight him. William Holden threatened to walk off the film. Another actor swore he'd beat Peckinpah into the dirt if he didn't back off. You don't need to imagine the tension, as it's baked into every frame of the movie. And then there's Straw Dogs. Peckinpah's drinking got so out of hand, a studio exec had to fly to Cornwall just to threaten him into finishing the shoot. The worst part? The infamous scene. He pressured 21-year-old Susan George to strip completely and only backed off when she refused point blank, telling him she could act the scene with her eyes. What ended up on screen was so disturbing the film was banned in the UK for decades. So yeah, Peckinpah got what he wanted, but if you're watching those scenes and thinking, how did they even film this? Just know the answer probably includes a lot of fear, booze, and people begging him to stop. Makes you wonder if cinematic violence is still just cinema when it leaves bruises behind. Francis Ford Coppola, Apocalypse Now, 1979. You've probably heard that Apocalypse Now is a difficult shoot, but difficult doesn't begin to cover it. I'm talking about 16 months in the jungle, monsoons wiping out sets, the director threatening suicide, and a lead actor who literally crawled to safety after having a heart attack. Martin Sheen was pushed so hard that he broke down down mid-scene, punched a real mirror, and bled on camera while Coppola kept rolling. That footage made it into the film. And Sheen? He called his family to say goodbye before going back to set. Then there was Brando. Overweight, unprepared, and refusing to read the script or even Heart of Darkness, the 1899 novella the entire film was based on. That book is about a man's descent into madness as he journeys upriver to confront a mysterious godlike figure. Sound familiar? Coppola built the whole movie around that concept, and Brando showed up having skipped all of it. He still demanded full creative control, so Coppola rewrote the entire ending, hid him in shadows, and fed him lines through an earpiece just to make something usable. The result is stunning. It's a masterpiece. But knowing what went on behind the camera, it's like watching a war movie made by people who actually went to war. You and I get 2 hours of brilliance. They lived through something closer to madness. William Friedkin, The Exorcist, 1973, Sorcerer, 1977. I've seen directors go to extremes, but Friedkin didn't just cross the line, he lit it on fire. On The Exorcist, he wanted real fear, so he'd fire shotguns off camera mid-scene to make actors flinch. He even slapped a real Jesuit priest across the face right before filming the last rites scene, then immediately yelled action to catch the shock on camera. And yes, that's the take in the final cut. The most infamous moment though, Friedkin ignored Ellen Burstyn's warnings about a stunt wire being too aggressive, then secretly told the crew to pull her harder. She was yanked so violently that she slammed into the floor, injured her spine, and screamed in real pain. That scream, you've heard it, it's in the movie. Friedkin never apologized. Decades later, Burstyn still calls it a bitter experience. Then came Sorcerer, where Friedkin pushed things even further. He forced the crew to rebuild a massive rope bridge twice, had actors drive trucks across it during a real storm, and even climbed onto the swaying rig with a handheld camera himself. Half the crew got sick. Friedkin lost 50 pounds and fired 5 production managers. The results were unforgettable. But ask yourself, when real pain becomes part of the performance, are we still watching a film, or just the aftermath of someone chasing perfection, no matter who gets hurt? Alejandro Jodorowsky, El Topo, 1970, The Holy Mountain, 1973. There's unsettling, and then there's Jodorowsky. When I first read about El Topo, I thought I'd misread the quote. Jodorowsky once claimed he really actress Mara Lorenzio during a scene to make it feel authentic. Later he retracted it, calling it surrealist publicity. But whether or not it happened, the fact that he thought that kind of shock marketing was clever, that alone crosses a line most filmmakers wouldn't even look at. And that wasn't even the worst of it. In The Holy Mountain, he staged a scene where small toads and iguanas, yes, actual living ones, were dressed in conquistador armor and arranged to reenact the Spanish conquest of Mexico. Then he blew them up on camera. This wasn't CGI or props, those were real animals being mutilated for symbolism. He did the same in El Topo, using actual animal carcasses and live blood as set dressing. As for the cast, Jodorowsky had the main actors live with him in a commune for weeks, undergoing spiritual rituals, fasting, and guided drug trips. One scene was shot while the entire group was tripping on psilocybin mushrooms, because he believed that's where the real performances lived. You can call it art, you can call it fearless, but at a certain point, you and I have to ask if the price of a movie is human trauma and animal death. What exactly are we applauding? Michael Cimino, Heaven's Gate, 1980. I'd heard Heaven's Gate was a disaster, but I wasn't ready for just how far Cimino went. He spent millions rebuilding entire sets because buildings were 2 feet off from his vision. He shot over 1.3 million feet of film, that's over 220 hours, and demanded 50 takes of minor shots just to get the right dust pattern. One battle sequence alone caused 16 injuries in a single day, and extras were knocked down by horses, thrown from wagons, and left lying in the mud without first aid. This wasn't just a difficult shoot, it was a slow motion crisis. And then there were the animals. Horses were tripped, one was allegedly blown up by an explosive charge, and dozens of chickens were decapitated for prop gore. Cimino even staged a real cockfight on camera. The American Humane Association was so horrified they refused to let the film display the "no animals were harmed" credit and led a public boycott. That controversy, plus a $44 million price tag and a total box office collapse, nearly sank United Artists and forced Hollywood to change how animal welfare is handled forever. You and I can appreciate ambition, but at what cost? When a film injures actors, kills animals, and still collapses under its own weight, maybe the most extreme thing about it isn't what's on screen. It's everything that happened behind it. Werner Herzog, Fitzcarraldo, 1982. Aguirre, The Wrath of God, 1972. There's method directing, and then there's Werner Herzog dragging a 320-ton steamship over a mountain because he didn't believe in special effects. For Fitzcarraldo, he insisted on filming in the Amazon rainforest with a real boat, a real incline, and real men pulling ropes uphill in 100-degree heat. A few crew members were seriously injured, one cameraman nearly lost his hand in a winch, and a crew member, bitten by a venomous snake, had to amputate his own foot with a chainsaw to survive. And yes, Herzog kept shooting. He once said, "If I abandon this project, I will be a man without dreams," and apparently with a whole lot of hospital bills. But Fitzcarraldo wasn't his first jungle meltdown. On Aguirre, The Wrath of God, Herzog shot entirely on location in Peru with cast and crew floating on makeshift rafts through flooded rivers. The shoot was plagued by disease, food shortages, and raging storms that destroyed equipment. Lead actor Klaus Kinski regularly exploded with rage, firing a rifle into a tent of extras at one point and threatening to quit or kill Herzog, depending on the day. A local tribesman quietly offered to assassinate Kinski. Herzog declined, barely. You and I can admire the vision, sure, but when you need a hitman to get through a movie, maybe the line between art and lunacy isn't just blurred, maybe it's been washed away by the Amazon River. James Cameron, The Abyss, 1989. You know, a shoot was brutal when the lead actor says he still doesn't talk about it. On The Abyss, James Cameron pushed underwater realism so far that Ed Harris nearly drowned. They filmed in a massive nuclear reactor tank filled with 7 million gallons of water. During one sequence, Harris ran out of air mid-shot and started frantically signaling the dive team. They took too long. He barely made it to the surface. Years later, when a journalist asked him about the film, Harris just said, "Ask me about it again and I'll punch you in the face." And it wasn't just him. Crew members passed out from exhaustion. Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio walked off set after a camera jammed during a scene where she was drenched and freezing. Her patience and her comfort were gone. Meanwhile, Cameron stayed underwater 12 hours a day, directing by writing on a whiteboard like it was all totally normal. The crew eventually made t-shirts that said, "You can't scare me, I work for Jim Cameron." The final product, visually groundbreaking. But if you find yourself holding your breath during those scenes, maybe it's because they did too. And not everyone came up smiling. Lars von Trier, Dancer in the Dark, 2000, Antichrist, 2009. Some directors push their actors physically. Lars von Trier prefers to break them emotionally. On Dancer in the Dark, he cast musician Björk in her first major film role, and then allegedly spent the shoot tearing her apart. She said he cornered her, touched her inappropriately, and shattered her trust so badly that she would run off set, tear up her costume, and hide. At one point, she walked off the production completely. Von Trier denied it all, but the damage stuck. Björk later said the experience made her never want to act again, and she hasn't since. Fast forward to Antichrist, and you can feel the emotional punishment baked into every frame. Von Trier admitted he was in the middle of a deep depression during production, and instead of taking time off, he poured it into the script. Charlotte Gainsbourg and Willem Dafoe were left to navigate raw, disturbing material with almost no guidance. Von Trier's direction was minimal. He expected them to just go there, fully, brutally, on camera. The performances are haunting, but when actors are breaking down for real and the person behind the camera keeps rolling, you and I have to wonder, are we watching art or watching someone unravel through someone else's pain? Michael Bay, Transformers series, Armageddon, 1998. If you've ever watched a Michael Bay movie and thought, that explosion looked real, it probably was. Bay's nickname on set is The General, and it fits. He runs his productions like a battlefield. On Transformers, Age of Extinction, he gave actors just minutes of prep before telling them to sprint through actual fireballs. Nicola Peltz said it best, "You're not acting, you're just running for your life." But danger wasn't just part of the set dressing, it got real. On Armageddon, Bruce Willis's stunt double nearly died when a massive pipe cracked him in the head. A hard hat saved his life. And during Transformers Dark of the Moon, an extra named Gabriella Sedillo was hit by a snapped towing cable during a car stunt. She suffered permanent brain damage and had to undergo emergency surgery. The settlement, $18.5 million, that's how bad it was. Then there's the Megan Fox saga. She called Bay a tyrant and compared him to Hitler, saying she and Shia LaBeouf were made to do insane things no insurance company would ever allow. Spielberg heard that and had her dropped from the next film. Bay gets the shot, no doubt, but if you're sitting in your seat wide-eyed at the spectacle, just know someone probably got singed, slammed, or screamed at to make it happen. Tobe Hooper, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974. This wasn't just a horror movie, it was survival, and not just for the characters. On The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Tobe Hooper didn't just direct, he wore people down. He isolated actors, screamed nonstop, and filmed in 110-degree heat with real rotting meat and animal bones on set. The dinner scene, that was shot over 27 straight hours, cast members vomited, some passed out. By the end, Edwin Neal, the guy who played the hitchhiker, said Vietnam was less stressful. He wasn't joking. Marilyn Burns was tied up, bruised, and bled for real when the fake blood rig failed, so they sliced her finger open with a razor blade. She later said, "I wasn't acting, I was just trying to stay alive." In one take, Jim Cieto hit her with a broomstick over and over until she fainted. Hooper just kept rolling. Gunnar Hansen nearly cut himself with a real chainsaw. Terry McMinn was hung on a harness that left bruises between her legs. No safety crew, no brakes, no forgiveness. Hooper admitted everyone hated him by the end, and he was proud of it. He believed the suffering added to the realism. Maybe it did, but if you ask me, this wasn't a film set, it was a pressure cooker. And the fear you're seeing, that wasn't fiction, that was real. David Fincher, Zodiac, 2007, Gone Girl, 2014. You've probably heard Fincher as a perfectionist, but on Zodiac, that meant up to 90 takes for a single scene, and not just the intense moments. Sometimes it was two people drinking coffee. Jake Gyllenhaal called it soul-crushing, saying scenes were reshot shot endlessly, sometimes days after they were supposedly wrapped. Robert Downey Jr. went further. At one point, he got so fed up with the lack of breaks, he started leaving mason jars of pee around the set. His words, "I understand gulags." You don't say that unless you're really over it. Fincher didn't flinch. He believed the repetition stripped away acting and left behind something honest. "If it takes 90 takes to get there, that's what it takes," he once said. And in his defense, it shows. By Gone Girl, the cast knew what to expect. Tyler Perry was stunned when Ben Affleck warned him, "Just so you know, 30 takes minimum." Perry nearly walked but stayed, and by the end he said working with Fincher was like a masterclass. Rosamund Pike embraced it too. She said other directors should be asked why they don't do more takes. Fincher's not cruel, but he is relentless, and if you're ever watching one of his scenes thinking, "Wow, that felt real," it probably was, because they did it over and over and over. Quentin Tarantino, Kill Bill 2003, Inglourious Basterds 2009. I admire Tarantino's movies, the style, the dialogue, the sheer confidence, but there's a side of his process that the more I learn about it, the harder it is to sit with. Take Kill Bill, for example. He wanted a shot of Uma Thurman driving a stunt car down a narrow, winding road. She didn't feel safe. She asked for a double. He refused. So she did it and slammed into a tree. She suffered a concussion, permanent neck and knee injuries, and called the whole thing dehumanizing. When the footage was finally released, it showed exactly what she said. No stunt pads, no trick angles, just a real crash in real time. And this wasn't an isolated moment. In Inglourious Basterds, when Diane Kruger's character is being choked, it's not Christoph Waltz doing it, it's Tarantino himself. He wanted the shot to look just right. Same with Kill Bill. When Uma gets spit on, that's not an effect, that's Tarantino again, stepping in. I get that he's all in on authenticity, but if you're like me, watching those scenes feels different now. There's a fine line between getting the performance and crossing into control. And when the director's the one doing the choking, maybe that line isn't just crossed, maybe it's erased. Jackie Chan, Police Story, 1985, Armor of God, 1986. I've always respected Jackie Chan, who hasn't? But the more you dig into what he put himself through for his movies, the admiration turns into something else. Maybe disbelief, maybe concern. In Police Story, there's a stunt where he slides down a pole wrapped in lights. The bulbs explode against his skin, he crashes through a glass pane, then lands back first onto a metal kiosk. He dislocated his pelvis, burned his hands, and kept going. No pads, no wires, just raw, punishing impact. Then there's Armor of God. Jackie missed a tree branch and fell headfirst onto a rock. He fractured his skull, needed emergency brain surgery, still has a plastic plate in his head, and permanent hearing loss in one ear. He later said, "I saw my blood shooting out like a fountain." And his stunt team, they're expected to keep up. No green screens, no faking it, just bruises, breaks, and full commitment. Quentin Tarantino once said Jackie's stunt work even surpasses Buster Keaton, calling it the greatest stunts filmed in any movie ever. Honestly, he's not wrong, but I watch those scenes differently now. You're not just seeing choreography, you're watching a man gamble with his body and again because he believes the pain is part of the magic. Alejandro González Iñárritu, The Revenant, 2015. There's commitment, and then there's The Revenant. Iñárritu didn't just want realism, he wanted survival. Shot entirely with natural light in the Canadian wilderness, the crew filmed for only a few hours each day in sub-zero conditions, often waist-deep in snow or knee-deep in frozen rivers. No sound stages, no shortcuts. One crew member called it a living hell. Another said it was the worst production experience of their career. At least 20 people quit, not because the movie was failing, but because they couldn't take the cold, the fatigue, or the perfectionism. And then there's DiCaprio. The man slept inside a horse carcass, ate raw bison liver, and crawled through ice for hours at a time. He got hypothermia, he got sick, and he just kept going. You remember his Oscar acceptance speech? That wasn't acting he was talking about, that was trauma. Iñárritu defended it all. He said you can't fake survival, you have to live it. And yeah, the film looks incredible, but when a movie becomes a test of physical endurance, I start wondering who's watching out for the people behind the camera. You might see beauty in those shots. I see frostbite, breakdowns, and a very thin line between filmmaking and full-blown wilderness suffering. So after all that chaos, where do we land? Who pushed the furthest? Past method, past obsession, straight into danger? For me, it's not even close. John Landis takes the crown. While filming Twilight Zone, the movie, he ignored safety warnings, broke child labor laws, and staged a dangerous helicopter stunt with real explosives at night with 2 illegally hired children. During the trial, it came out that he told a producer, "We may lose the helicopter, but we'll get the shot." Thanks for sticking around to the end, and now I want to hear from you. Which director do you think crossed the line the hardest? And if you want something fun after all that darkness, check out my video, 1 Fact for Every Stranger Things episode, season 1 to 5.